So now we will see one small chapter. Let's complete that. Time of supply. Please take time of supply chapter. Segment 6, time of supply. You can see here, first, time of supply. What is the objective of time of supply? Three objectives are there for time of supply. Number one, to determine the due date of payment of GST. That is, the due date of payment of GST for a transaction depends upon the time of supply for a transaction. For example, if time of supply for a transaction falls in July, we need to pay by 20th of August. If it is August, we need to pay by 20th of September, like that. And second point is to determine the exchange rate. In rule 34 in value of supply, we have seen whenever the transaction is denominated in foreign currency, like import of goods or import of services, export of goods or export of services is in foreign currency, we need to convert that into Indian rupees for payment of GST. For that, we need to take CBIC rate or GAAP rate. Again, that rate prevailing on time of supply we need to take. So that is the second objective of time of supply. Third objective of time of supply is to determine the rate of GST, because on different dates there will be different rates of GSTs. So we need to see what is the time of supply for the transaction, as on time of supply what is the rate of GST that is relevant. So time of supply is relevant for these three purposes. Number one, to determine the due date of payment of GST, to determine the exchange rate, and to determine the rate of GST. But the time of supply for a transaction is in turn dependent upon the due date of invoice. That due date of invoice is given in section 31. In that section 31, we have total 6 subsections. In that 31, subsection 1, subsection 4 and subsection 7. 147 is for goods. Subsection 1 is applicable in normal cases, and subsection 4 is in case of continuous supply of goods. Subsection 7 is sale on approval or on return basis. First you need to see sale on approval or return basis, you need to check. Suppose if it is given in the question like sale on approval, means the product will be delivered, and if you like you will accept, otherwise you will return. So that is sale on approval or on return. So only when you accept, it is considered as sale. So therefore whenever you accept, at that time I need to raise invoice to you. What if you are not accepting within 6 months? On expiry of 6 months it is deemed that you have accepted, so I need to raise the invoice accordingly. Therefore 6 months from the date of removal or date of acceptance, whichever is earlier, will be taken as the due date of invoice. Number 2, in case of continuous supply of goods, continuous supply of goods means there will be successive supply of goods for which the payments are settled on a periodical basis. Then what we need to do is that check whether the payments are received irrespective of the account statement. Yes, if the payments are received irrespective of the account statement, the payment received date. If the payments are received based on account statement, the account statement date. So account statement date or the payment received date, as the case may be, should be taken. Say for example, I enter into contract with you to supply the chemicals through a pipeline, wherein first month, second month and third month you need to give me 2 lakhs, 2 lakhs, 2 lakhs on ad hoc basis. After 3 months I will give you an account statement and the differential amount you need to pay. So therefore first month, second month, third month, anyhow you need to give me 2 lakhs, 2 lakhs, 2 lakhs. So whenever you give me 2 lakhs, at that time I will raise the invoice for 2 lakhs. Whereas for all these 3 months I will give you an account statement. In that account statement I will mention, say for example 6,86,000 minus 222 already you have given, so 86,000 I will give you an account statement. So that account statement date will be taken as the due date of invoice for the 86,000 portion. So for whichever amount that is mentioned in the account statement date, for other amounts the payment received date, that should be taken as the due date of invoice for continuous supply of goods. Continuous supply of goods means, remember, there will be successive supply of goods for which the payments are settled on a periodical basis. Then section 31 subsection 1, normal cases. In normal cases we need to see supply involves movement of goods or supply does not involve movement of goods. If supply involves movement of goods, we need to give invoice at the time of removal. If supply does not involve movement of goods, at the time of delivery or making the goods available to the recipient. Then in case of services, we have section 31 subsection 2, subsection 5 and subsection 6. Subsection 2 is normal cases. So normal, then subsection 5 is continuous supply of services. Subsection 6 is cessation of services. In case of cessation of services, that is immediately after completion of the service, abruptly stopping the service is known as cessation of service. Immediately after that cessation, they need to give the invoice with respect to the proportionate amount. Say for example, an actor entered into contract with the producer to act in the movie for 50 days. So he gave 50 days call sheet, and for each day he need to receive a remuneration of 1 crore. So 50 days into 1 crore, 50 crores is the remuneration. He acted for 5 days. Thereafter he is stopping the movie because he did not like the movie in which it is progressing. So due to that reason he stopped acting in that movie. But for 5 days he need to get the money. So immediately whenever he stops, so he need to raise the invoice for that 5 days. That is the due date of invoice in case of cessation of service. Whereas in case of continuous supply of services, for continuous supply of services means what? A service which takes more than 3 months to complete, and so both the conditions should be satisfied. It should take more than 3 months to complete and it should involve periodic payment obligation. Then only it is a continuous supply of service. For continuous supply of service, we need to check whether due date of installment is ascertainable from the contract. For example, construction contract is a continuous supply of service because it will take more than 3 months and there will be some periodic payments also, and they will specify the due date. Say for example, as on 31st March you have to pay this much money, and as on 30th April you have to pay this much money. Like that they have defined the due dates. Even rental agreement is also coming under continuous supply of services because the rental agreement will be for a period of 11 months and the periodic payments will be involved, and they will mention like by 5th of every month you need to pay the rental amount like that. So that 5th will be taken as the due date of invoice for that particular installment. Is it clear? So if the due date of installment is mentioned in the document, then the due date of installment will be taken as the due date of invoice. Suppose if the payment is linked to completion of event, again construction example, if you see, they will be mentioning like upon 30% completion you have to pay this much, upon 60% completion you have to pay this much, like that they will be telling the milestone events. So whenever the 30% or 60% completion happens, at that time we need to give invoice for that respective amount. Suppose in the absence of these two, where the due date of installment is not ascertainable from the contract, when the payment is not linked to completion of event, as and when we receive the installment, at that time we need to raise the invoice. That is in case of continuous supply of services. Whereas in normal cases, that is banking services, 45 days from the date of completion, and banking or insurance, other cases 30 days from the date of completion, that is the time limit for issuance of invoice. So this is the due date of invoice. What is the need of due date of invoice? Due date of invoice is relevant for the purpose of determining the time of supply, because if you see in time of supply for services we have time of supply under section 13, whereas for goods we have time of supply under section 12. So both 12 subsection 1 and 13 subsection 1 says that the liability to pay GST is determined based on the time of supply. Then subsection 2 talks about FCM. Both subsection 2 talks about FCM. Both subsection 3 talks about RCM. Then subsection 4 talks about vouchers. Subsection 5 residual cases. Subsection 6 interest, late fee or penalty for delay in receipt of consideration. But if you see the subsection 4, subsection 5 and subsection 6, the provisions are common between goods and services. Whereas in case of section 12 subsection 2, time of supply under FCM, goods FCM. For goods FCM, we need to see whether the person is opting for composition scheme or specified actionable claims. What are specified actionable claims? HC block, horse racing, casinos, betting, lottery, online money gaming and gambling. In that case, we need to take 3 dates. Due date of invoice, just now we determined due date of invoice, that due date of invoice, or actual date of invoice, or date of payment, whichever is earlier. Which means whether they will pay GST on advances, yes. If the invoice is next month and the due date of invoice also next month, then payment is received this month, they need to pay GST on advances. That's what we connected in composition scheme. We need to see the bill of supply and we need to add the advances received during the period minus advance of the past period, because it would have been taxed at the time itself. So in case of person opting for composition scheme and specified actionable claims, time of supply is actual date of invoice or due date of invoice or date of payment, whichever is earlier, and GST payable on advances. In other cases, it will be actual date of invoice or due date of invoice, whichever is earlier, only 2 dates. As date of payment is not there, whether GST payable on advances, no. GST not payable on advances in case of goods covered under FCM. Only for composition scheme and specified actionable claims we need to pay. Then time of supply in case of goods under RCM. First we saw goods under FCM, that is 12.2, 12.3 goods under RCM. We need to take 3 dates. The date on which goods are received by the recipient, date on which payment is made to supplier, or 31st day from the date of invoice. So the date on which recipient has received the goods. As it is RCM, we need to see from the recipient point of view. The date on which recipient has received the goods, the date on which recipient is making payment to supplier, or 31st day from the date of invoice, whichever is earlier will be taken. So whether GST payable on advances in case of goods under RCM, of course yes, because date of payment is also one of the date. GST payable on advance in case of goods covered under RCM. Then next we have services under FCM, that is 13 subsection 2. Check whether the invoice is given within the due date. What is the due date? Just now we discussed 30 days, 45 days, continuous supply, etc. If the invoice is given within the due date, then invoice date, that is actual date of invoice or date of payment, whichever is earlier. So ADOI within DDOI, that is actual date of invoice is given within the due date. Then date of invoice, which invoice? Actual date of invoice or date of payment, whichever is earlier. What if invoice is not given within the due date? If invoice is not within due date, then we need to take date of completion or date of payment, whichever is earlier. In both the places, date of payment is there, which means GST payable on advances for services under FCM. Whereas what is taken as the GST, like time of supply in case of RCM, date on which payment is made to supplier, or 61st day from the date of invoice, whichever is earlier. And GST payable on advance, yes, because date of payment is one of the date. So therefore GST payable on advances in case of services covered under RCM. So this invoice may be given by supplier or invoice may be given by recipient, that is based on the self invoice. Then in case of vouchers, so this is about service under RCM. If you see RCM, goods RCM, service RCM, first date is not there and second date is there, and instead of 31st day here it is 61st day. In case of vouchers, so vouchers are divided into two: identifiable vouchers, non-identifiable vouchers. For identifiable vouchers at the time of issuance of voucher, non-identifiable voucher at the time of redemption of voucher. So today itself, this is identifiable voucher, which means that I know against which product or service you are going to redeem. So therefore today itself I know the product, so I am paying GST. So for identifiable voucher, date of issuance of voucher. Non-identifiable voucher at the time of redemption. So whenever you are coming to my shop and you are redeeming the voucher, at the time only I know against which product you are going to redeem. So therefore that is taken as the time of supply. So in case of identifiable voucher, what if I have already paid the GST but you are not redeeming the voucher? Today I gave you the voucher and considering it as time of supply, I paid the tax, but you are not coming to my shop and redeeming it, and the voucher gets expired. Unnecessarily whatever GST I have paid, I can get it as a refund under excess payment of tax. Whereas in case of non-identifiable voucher, anyhow I will be paying GST only when you come and redeem. So if you are not coming and redeem, so the liability shall not arise for me. Then in residual cases, before moving on to residual cases, first of all, before applying residual cases, there is one more point. You can write that there. In case of goods under RCM, in case of service under FCM or RCM, please write down. In case of goods under RCM, in case of service under FCM or RCM, if time of supply cannot be determined. Why time of supply cannot be determined? Maybe you don't know one date. The date on which goods are received is not known, or the date on which payment is made to supplier is not known, or one date is not known here. Simple. In that case, time of supply cannot be determined. When time of supply cannot be determined, then what should be taken as the time of supply? Date of entry in the books of recipient should be taken. If we don't have that also, then only we need to come into residual cases. If not available, then residual cases under 12 subsection 5 or 13 subsection 5. So this is common for goods under RCM, service under FCM or RCM. Okay. First you need to see whether time of supply is possible as per regular provisions. No. Then you need to take time of supply as the date of entry in the books of recipient. If recipient data is also not available, then come into residual cases. Means what? We have evaded the tax. We tried to evade the tax. That's where residual case will come into picture. In that case, whether due date of return is available, which means that he is a registered person. Where the person is required to file returns, means he is a registered person. Whatever is the due date of filing that return, that should be taken. Where the periodical return is not required to be filed, the date of payment of GST. Then 12 subsection 6 is interest, late fee or penalty for delay in receipt of consideration. As and when such additional consideration is received, that should be taken. Therefore, GST is payable on receipt basis. Related to interest, late fee or penalty for delay in receipt of consideration, remember few points. Point number 1, for that interest, late fee or penalty, So I am just writing it here. You can make note somewhere. So what are the special points? Special points for interest or late fee, interest or late fee or penalty, interest or late fee or penalty for delay in receipt of consideration, for delay in receipt of consideration. So what are those points? Number one, what is the time of supply for this? For this interest late fee, first it should be included in the value, correct? It should be included in the value, included in value as per section, include in value as per under section 15 subsection 2 clause D. What is the rate applicable to this interest? There is no separate rate. There is no separate rate that is applicable to this interest. GST at invoice, GST at the rate mentioned in invoice, GST at the rate mentioned in invoice. So definitely you are not making the payment, for that only this interest is collected. So for that invoice, whatever is the GST rate, for example 12% means this interest also 12%. If in the invoice 18% is there, this interest also 18%. If in the invoice it is exempted, this interest also will be exempted. Number 3, what is the time of supply? Time of supply is on receipt basis. Receipt basis means whenever we are receiving, we need to pay GST. Okay, so it is not on accrual basis, only on receipt basis. Number 4, and always it is assumed to be inclusive of GST. So unless given in the question, always assumed to be inclusive of GST, always assumed to be inclusive of GST unless specified otherwise. Unless specified otherwise, it is always assumed to be inclusive of GST. Then what is the document that should be given in case of debit, in case of this interest? Debit note to be issued by supplier to recipient, to be issued by supplier to recipient. So these are the points that we have. So total 4 points. First, it should be included in the value under 15(2)(d). GST is at the rate mentioned in invoice. Time of supply is on receipt basis. Always it is assumed to be inclusive of GST. And finally, debit note to be issued by supplier to recipient. Okay. So that is this. So in case of interest, late fee or penalty for delay in receipt of consideration, it will be always taxable on receipt basis. So we completed the time of supply provisions. Now you can see here the additional points related to this. So date of payment. So in supplier's case also, recipient case also, so FCM also date of payment is there, RCM also date of payment is there. What should be taken as the date of payment? In case of supplier, date of entry in the books or date of credit in the bank account, whichever is earlier. From recipient point of view, when you see date of entry in the books or date of debit in their bank account, whichever is earlier. Then in case of goods, other than composition scheme or specified actionable claims, goods covered under FCM on advances, GST is not payable and GST is payable only upon invoice, as the time of supply is due date or actual date, whichever is earlier. But in case of services under FCM, GST payable on advances. Then up to 1000 rupees received in excess, up to 1000 rupees received in excess of the invoice. So wherever we need to pay GST on advances, whenever we are receiving some excess amount, but that excess amount is up to 1000 in excess of invoice. For example, invoice is for 13,200 and we are receiving 14,000. So this 800 rupees which is received in excess is up to 1000 rupees. For that 800 rupees, either we can take this month in which the 800 rupees is received, or for this 800 anyhow we are going to give invoice in future. So that date. So we at the option of the supplier they can decide. So up to 1000 rupees received in excess of the invoice in case of service covered under FCM. Time of supply can be date of invoice or determined as per section 13(2). Supplier has the option to choose. So date of invoice means whenever for that excess amount we give the invoice in future, or the regular provisions of 13(2). What is regular provisions of 13(2)? Invoice date or payment date, whichever is earlier. So supplier has option to choose. What is the advantage of this? The advantage is that they can defer the tax payment. Then in case of supply of services between associated enterprises, as per section 92A of Income Tax Act, where the supplier is located outside India and the recipient is located in India, it is an import of services. Usually for import of services, the date on which payment is made to supplier or 61st day from the date of invoice, whichever is earlier should be taken. But in case of associate enterprises, date on which payment is made to supplier same. Instead of 61st day, the date of entry in the books of recipient should be taken. See this. Where the supplier is outside India and the recipient is in India, time of supply shall be date of entry in the books of recipient or the date of payment to supplier, whichever is earlier. Then point number 5, when the goods are taken outside India for exhibition, is it supply or not a supply? It is not a supply. But when the same is not brought back within 6 months, then this deeming fiction, sale on approval, will come into picture. So it will be deemed to be supply. Then section 14. Section 14 talks about time of supply in case of change in rate. First of all, when time of supply, that is section 14, will be applicable. Section 14 will be applicable between 3 dates there is a change in rate. What are those 3 dates? Date of supply, that is date of completion or date of invoice or date of payment. Between these 3 dates there is a change in rate. Also it is applicable in case of services and it is applicable in case of composition scheme and it is applicable in case of specified actionable claim. For all service providers, section 14 will be applicable. For goods, only 2 places it is applicable, that is composition scheme and specified actionable claim. For other supplier of goods, the section 14 will not be applicable. So between 3 dates there is a change in rate. First, if the completion is before change in rate, if the date of completion is before change in rate, then only 2 more dates are there. What is that? Invoice date or payment date. You take whichever is earlier. So date of invoice or date of payment, whichever is earlier should be taken. Suppose if the completion is after change in rate, again check the invoice date and payment date. If both are before, then whichever is earlier. If one before, one after, whichever is later. If both are before change in rate, whichever is earlier. If one before, one after, then we will take whichever is later. And usually what should be taken as the date of payment? Date of payment will be date of entry in the books or date of credit in the bank account, whichever is earlier. But for the purpose of section 14, if the payment is credited within 4 working days, if the payment is credited within 4 working days from the change in rate, then we need to take date of credit or date of entry, whichever is earlier. If the payment is credited beyond 4 working days from the change in rate, then we need to take date of credit in the bank account. Okay, here again we have one provision related to whichever is later, mark that. So date of invoice or date of payment, whichever is later. So as per section 14, what is considered as the date of payment? If the payment is credited within 4 working days from the change in rate, then entry date or credit date, whichever is earlier. If the credit in the bank account is beyond 4 working days, only the date of credit in the bank account will be taken. So this point, don't forget, you apply it only in case of section 14. Then there are 2 circulars related to this time of supply. So look into the first circular. So these 2 are newly added one amendment. First one, what is the time of supply in case of construction of hybrid annuity model projects under National Highway Authority? So usually what happens, the contractor will enter into contract with NHAI to lay down the road and they will also be doing maintenance of the road, that is called as hybrid annuity model projects. In case of hybrid annuity model projects, what happens? So it is like a continuous supply of service because it will take more than 3 months to complete definitely, and there will be periodic payment also because the payment will be payable by annuities by the government. And yearly there will be operations also, operation and maintenance also, for which again some money will be received. So definitely this is not a normal supply of service, it's a continuous supply of service. HAM contract is a single contract where the supplier is responsible for both construction of highway and its operation and maintenance over a period. It is a continuous supply of service. When it is a continuous supply of service, what should be taken as the due date? Definitely due date will be determined as per section 31 subsection 5, which says that if the due date of installment is ascertainable from the contract, the due date of installment is the due date of invoice. If the payment is linked to completion of event, as and when the event is completed, and in the absence of that, as and when the payment is received. and what should be taken as the time of supply. The time of supply will be as per section 13 subsection 2. If invoice is given within the due date, invoice date or payment date, whichever is earlier. If invoice is not given within the due date, completion date or payment date, whichever is earlier. Listen, this is the point. Completion date or payment date, whichever is earlier. What will be taken as the completion date? Whether the completion date will be the actual completion of the project? No, it is not actual completion of the project. If invoice is given within the due date, no problem, invoice date, payment date, whichever is earlier. If invoice not given within the due date, then completion date or payment date, whichever is earlier. So what should be taken as the date of completion? The due date of installment only should be taken as the date of completion. That is why they have given this clarification. So please write down. Due date of installment is considered as date of completion. Due date of installment is considered as date of completion. Okay. So initially there was no clarity, and thereafter, so in study material they have given this, and clearly they have specified due date of installment is considered as the date of completion. And in every installment there will be interest component also. As there is interest component in every installment, so that should be included in the value or not? Yes, definitely it should be included in the value. Installment payable by NHAI include interest component, which is part of value as per section 15(2)(d). Now look into one question related to this. I have given one question on amendment for this. So that is question number, think 7. Question number 7. You can see this question number 7. Larsen and Toubro L&T has entered into hybrid annuity model contract with the National Highway Authority of India for the construction, operation and maintenance of a highway. The contract specifies that L&T will receive payment in 20 equal installment over 10 years. Each installment is 10 lakhs, which includes 1 lakh as an interest component. So definitely 10 lakhs will be taken as the value, because interest should be included in the value. The deemed date of completion of milestone event is 30th June. The due date of first installment is 1st July. What is the due date of installment? 1st July. And however, L&T issued the invoice for the first installment on 5th July. So is invoice given within the due date? No. And the payment was received on 15th July. The applicable rate of GST for such contract is 18%. What is the due date of invoice as per section 31 subsection 5? As per section 31 subsection 5, as the due date, first priority is what? Due date of installment ascertainable. The due date of installment is the due date of invoice. What is the due date of installment? 1st July. So that 1st July 2024 will be taken as the due date of invoice. Okay. Then next, what is the time of supply as per 13(2), and what is the due date of payment of GST? As per section 13 subsection 2, if invoice given within due date, then invoice date, payment date, whichever is earlier. Check when the invoice is given, 5th July. Is it within due date? No. So therefore we need to take date of completion or date of payment, whichever is earlier. Is the date of completion 30th June or 1st July? It is 1st July, because date of completion will be taken as the date of invoice, but not the date of completion of milestone event. So therefore kindly make the correction to your answer in the book, because initially I thought it was date of completion, but later on only I have read that properly. So therefore date of completion is the due date of installment. Due date of installment, that is 1st July 2024, or date of payment. What is the date of payment? 15 July 2024, whichever is earlier, that is 1st July 2024. If 1st July is the time of supply, then what will be taken as the due date of payment of GST? Next month 20, that is 20th August 2024 will be taken. Okay. Understood this? Then next one. Third part of this question, you see, calculate the GST liability for the first installment, that is same. Therefore we need to take 10 lakhs into 18%, because entire 10 lakhs will be taken as the value including the interest component, so on that 18%. Then 4, what will be the time of supply if the invoice is issued on 1st July 2024? What is the due date? 1st July. Invoice also given on 1st July. So what should be taken as the time of supply, as invoice is given within the due date? So invoice date or payment date, whichever is earlier, same, that is 1st July only will be taken. So next month 20th will be taken as the due date of payment of GST. Understood this circular here? And related to this circular, I have given one more question. I coined one question in the test series. You can see that question. Okay. And so my humble request to all of you is that, so this May 25 exam, I have given the test series. Total I think 8 tests. In that 8 tests, 8 question papers with suggested answers, you take a print. It's open only. It is shared in the drive. So you take a print of it and you keep that and try to at least see that and go for exam. It's okay if you are not writing a test, but at least see that once, because lot of new type of questions, mainly on amendments, I have coined lot of questions, so that along with none of those questions is in this amendments, question on amendments, fully newly I have coined. So that also you go through, so that you will get a confidence to face the exam. Okay. Next, look into another circular, last pa. After this I will complete. Listen please. So it's because of that guy only. He asked me to discuss those questions now. Then what is the time of supply in case of spectrum allocation services by government to telecom operators? What should be taken as the time of supply? Generally, government will be allocating spectrum to the telecom operators. If the spectrum is allocated before 1/4/2016, that will be exempted. But now if the spectrum is allocated, definitely it will be taxable, because we have one exemption. Assignment of right to use telecom spectrum by government to business entities before 1/4/2016 is exempted. But if it is after 1/4/2016, definitely it will be taxable. How to determine the time of supply? Will it be a continuous supply of service? Of course, yes. It is a continuous supply of service, because yearly they will be required to pay the royalty also. And this upfront payment will be there. Just to get the right, they have to pay upfront payment. That upfront payment may be payable at lump sum, that is in one shot, or they can make the payment in installments. Then how to determine the time of supply? In that case, even though it is continuous supply of services, they have not given the regular provisions. They have created a separate set of provision for that. Whenever the installment is due or whenever the installment is paid, whichever is earlier. Simple. Whenever the installment is due or whenever the installment is paid, whichever is earlier, that should be taken. And suppose if it is upfront amount, same. Whenever that upfront amount is due or whenever that upfront amount is paid. Option exercised by telecom operator. Either they can go for upfront payment or they can go for deferred payment. And whatever the case may be, you need to read this box. That's it. GST liability arises when the payment is made or due, whichever is earlier. Okay. And so in this case, GST liability arises as and when the installments are due or paid, whichever is earlier. Simple. Whenever it is due or whenever we are paying, whichever is earlier. Okay. How do we know the installment data? There will be something called as frequency allotment letter. Frequency assignment letter issued by Department of Telecommunication to telecom operator. There we will get the installment data, but that is when it should be paid. Don't consider that as the invoice. Cannot be considered as tax invoice. That's it. With the time of supply is over. Related to this, one question is there. You can see that question number 8. Question number 8. Reliance Jio has successfully bid for the allocation of spectrum by the Department of Telecommunication under the Government of India spectrum allocation model. The total bid amount for the spectrum allocation is rupees 1000 crores. Reliance Jio is given two payment options. Option 1, make a full upfront payment of 1000 crore on or before 30th June 2024. Option 2, pay 10 equal installments. The first installment is due on 1st July with each installment comprising both principal and interest. The installment amount considering an annual interest rate of 10% is as follows. They gave, this is the frequency assignment letter. I told you, na, they will mention which installment, how much is the amount, and by when it should be paid, like that. The frequency assignment letter from DOT specifies this payment option, also states that GST at the rate of 18% applicable on the spectrum allocation. Assume that invoice is issued by DOT on 15 June. Actually, invoice is irrelevant here, and you are required to determine the following. Number 1, determine when GST liability arises. If Reliance Jio opt for full upfront payment and calculate the GST amount payable, assume that the payment is made on 28th June. In case of full upfront amount, by when they should make payment? 30th June. When are they making payment? 28th June. Whichever is earlier will be 28th June. That's it. Then second, what will be your answer in one above if the payment is made on 5th July and such delay is condoned? Then 30th June. 30th June or 5th July, whichever is earlier will be 30th June. Determine the GST liability, timing and amount if Reliance Jio chooses to pay in installments, and specifically calculate the GST payable for the second installment. Second installment due on 1st July, but they are making payment on 30th June. So whichever is earlier will be 30th June. And what is the GST amount? 144 crore. But it includes interest. Let it be. This is interest on account of delay in receipt of consideration that should be included in the value and chargeable to GST. And as 30th June is the time of supply, next month 20th, that is 20th July, will be taken as the due date of payment of GST. What will be your answer? What will be your answer in 3 above? If the payment is made on 4th July and such delay is condoned by DOT, what is the due date? 1st July and 4th July, whichever is earlier will be 1st July. So next month 20th will be taken as the due date. Understood? So with that, time of supply is over.